Hello, I'm Andy Walker. Welcome to Digital Farm TV Rural News. Winter crops across Australia face mixed prospects heading into spring, according to the Australia Crop Report released last week by the Australian Bureau of Agricultural Resource Economics and Science. ABARES Executive Director Paul Morris said winter crop production was forecast to be lower than the record harvest last season. This reflected relatively dry seasonal conditions in Western Australia and some parts of southeastern Australia, Paul Morris said. By contrast, conditions had been more positive in northern New South Wales and Queensland, where crops were forecast to achieve above average yields. Australian winter crop production is forecast to be around 36.2 million tonnes this year. New South Wales farmers, environmental groups and miners have joined forces to condemn the New South Wales Government's new rules for how coal seam gas drilling and coal mining may be carried out. The new guidelines, contained in the final version of a state strategic land use policy released last week, don't quarantine any part of New South Wales from exploration or mining applications, despite demands from farmers and conservationists, according to Fairfax Media. The policy significantly expands the amount of land classified as strategic agricultural land and therefore subject to a gateway process overseen by an, as yet anonymous, independent scientific panel. Strong concerns remain that protections for aquifers from coal seam gas drilling and mining were not strong enough. Agriculture in Queensland would be decimated by the new Liberal National State Government, with hundreds of jobs to be slashed from the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Federal Agriculture Minister Senator Joe Ludwig described the Newman government's first budget last week as bad news for Queensland farmers and regional communities, and condemned the state for slashing 450 jobs from the Queensland Department of Agriculture. Reports that 450 people would be cut from the Agriculture Department were an outrage, Senator Ludwig said. Initial figures showed this could be almost 20% of the Queensland Agriculture Department's workforce. The job losses would be in addition to cuts to biosecurity spending, agricultural colleges and more. Group Australian Dairy Farmers has called on the federal government to stand by independent evidence when it came to setting dietary advice about dairy foods. For the first time in almost 10 years, the dairy dietary guidelines for Australians were under revision to recognise changes in nutritional science and to ensure they reflected the latest knowledge on nutrition and health. Australian Dairy Farmers has expressed concern that the National Health and Medical Research Council's Working Committee's proposed advice on dairy foods is at odds with current evidence. The Council proposed recommending Australians consume milk, yoghurt and cheese that was mostly reduced fat, and that overall consumption of regular fat dairy foods should be halved, according to ADF. ADF President Chris Griffin said there were no compelling health reasons to avoid regular fat dairy foods. The trouble with the reduced fat message was that it was not evidence-based, and it put people off regular fat dairy foods, the type that most Australians prefer. Well, that's it for Digital Farm TV Rural News this week. I'm Andy Walker. Look forward to your company next week.